Sachas Nedarim Daf Hey contains one Mishnah. Until the Mishnah, the Gemara is finishing up its discussion about a machlokes Tanoim. If somebody steals tevel, how much does he pay back? Gemara will discuss what the pshat in that machlokes is. Then Gemara will give another answer to a contradiction in our last Mishnah. That will introduce the next Mishnah, which talks about a type of neder that women can make, which is not meferable because it doesn't fit either of the categories, and that'll take us to the topic of davar shaloi b'lo olam, whether a person could be makdish or make a neder on those things or not. So we're discussing machlokes between Rabbi and Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Huda about somebody stole tevel, that is produce which had not had truma or meiser taken from it. How much does he have to pay back? Does he have to pay back the full amount that he stole? Rebbe says he has to pay the full amount that he stole. Whatever he stole, that's what he gives back, even though part of that will have to be given away to Truma or Meiser, and therefore is not really the property of the owner. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says you only have to pay back what he would have been able to keep, what the chulin percentage of that Truma and Meiser. You can deduct from what he stole the amount that he would anyway have to have given away for Truma and Meiser because it's not his property. So the Gemara wants to understand what is this machlokes about. So the Gemara first offers that the machlokes is about tovas hana mamon. That is, the one value that the owner has in his Truma and Meiser is the right to decide who to give it to, which Kohen, which Levi does he give it to. Because he has that right, he does have a bit of value in it. He can take some money for who he gives it to. So according to Rebbe, the Gemara wants to say he has that value and therefore it belongs to him, and you at least have to pay for that value, if not for the entire thing. According to Rebbe Yehuda, you don't have that right, or that right is not considered to be a monetary value, and therefore it's not considered like he has any ownership in it. So the Gemara says this is not the pshat. This is not the correct. Really, everybody agrees that it is not considered to be value at all. That's not money. However, the reason that Rebbe says you have to pay back that money, the Truma and Meiser portion, is because Rebbe holds that Truma which is not taken is not considered to be as if it was taken. We look at it, we say it's not taken. We don't look at it as if it was taken. It's all there. Whatever he stole, that's what he gives back. We don't look at what's going to happen in the future. Basically, Rabbi Yehuda holds of a concept called anything that's loy hormu is kahormu zami. Truma that's not taken off yet but will be is viewed as if it's taken off already, and therefore you have to give it back minus that amount because it's considered to be as if it was taken already. So Gemara asks, how does this explain the machlokes? Even if you hold that it has to be taken off at some point and it's not considered like it was taken already, why should I have to pay it back? The owner doesn't get that value. It still doesn't make sense that that he should need to pay for that. Meaning, if we're saying at this point that everybody agrees that the right to decide who gets it is not considered to be value, that there is no value in this Truma and Meiser. So even if it's not separated yet, still, there's no value in it. There's a percentage of this crop that he cannot do anything with. So he has no value in it. So therefore, there's no reason you have to pay that back. So therefore, the Gemara says, all right, you know what? We're going to leave the question of Tovas Hana, of the right to decide who gets the money, who gets the Truma and the Meiser. That is undecided whether that's considered to be a value or not. Either way, I could say this machlokes, and that is that each one may have a knas. And that is that Rebbe may say that we knas the thief, and we say you have to pay back the full value because we don't want you to go around stealing. Because you stole, we're going to penalize you and make you have to pay the full value, even if the tovasana, even if the right to decide is not considered to be any value at all, we make you pay more than you would have logically had to pay. And I could say the other way in Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Huda, could be he even holds that the tovasana is money, but still you don't get to collect the full amount. We knas the owner, and he doesn't get to collect the full amount, even though he has a partial value in it, because why did he leave Truma hanging around so that somebody went ahead and was able to steal it? He should have gotten rid of his Truma right away and avoided the issue. Okay, the Gemara leaves this. So now the Gemara goes back to our previous conversation that we had at the end of the last stuff. We were discussing apparent contradiction in the Mishnah. The Mishnah discussed if somebody made a neder asering hana on Kohanim and Leviim, all Kohanim and all Leviim. So we said the Kohanim and Leviim could still collect his truma and his meiser. If, however, he asered only some Kohanim and Leviim, then those Kohanim and Leviim cannot collect his truma and his meiser. So my question is, I don't understand, is collecting truma and meiser considered to be a hana from the person who had it, or not? If it's not, so then why can't the Kohanim and Leviim who had the Isser on them collect it anyway? And if it is, how could everybody not have, if the Isser is on everyone, how come they are allowed to collect it? So now the Gemara answers that it's different. And because in the first case, he made the Isser on all Kohanim and all Leviim, that means that no one can possibly have any value out of this Truma and this Meiser. No one's allowed to get it except Kohanim and Leviim. And now they can't get it because it's an Isser Hana. Therefore, it's valueless to the entire planet. If it's valueless to everybody, it becomes like Afra. It becomes like dirt and has no value. It's useless. That being the case, anybody who gets it doesn't get any Hana. If that's so, then Kohanim and Levin can come and take it because there's no Hana from it. There is no value to it. In the latter case, however, there is value always to some Kohanim and Levim that aren't covered by the Isser Hana. So then the Kohanim and Levim who do have the Isser Hana cannot come and take it because there is value in it, and that's a Hana. All right, now we get to our next Mishnah, which we've seen quoted many times throughout the Masechta, and it talks about a type of neder which cannot be made for by the husband because it does not fit either of the categories. It's not beino veino, not between the husband and the wife, and it's not something which causes major deprivation. It's not something which causes ino nefesh. So the examples are if she makes a neder to say that my work, my maaseh yadayim, cannot go to benefit my father or your father, my brother or your brother. All those circumstances, there's no neder shaykh. Now, there's no hafara shaykh. Now, what if she says, now my maaseh yadayim cannot go to you? She asks it on her husband. So there, she's violating the Torah's chiyuv, al pi halacha. She has to give her maaseh yadayim to the husband as part of the deal. Certain things that he gives her and certain things she gives him. Her maaseh yadayim is one of those things that she owes to him. So she cannot ban that from her husband. So what happens in a case like this? So the Tanna Kama says he doesn't have to be made for it because it's not chal anyway, because it goes against the halacha. Now, Rabbi Akiva and Yochanan ben Nuri say he should be made for it anyway. Rabbi Akiva says he should be made for it because maybe there'll be an extra above and beyond the amount that she owes. She only owes equivalent to what she receives in food from him. So in order to make sure that the extra doesn't become usher on him, he should be made for it. Yochanan ben Nuri says he should be made for it because what happens if he divorces her? If he divorces her, then the Isser is chal. He no longer owes her food, and she no longer owes him maaseh yadayim, and now the neder will be chal if he's not made for it. Then if he wants to go ahead and remarry her, now her maaseh yadayim are usher on him. And therefore, it's smart for him to go ahead and actually be made for it. So now the Gemara begins, and the Gemara wants to say that it seems to be based on the topic of davar shelo ba'al olam, because the money that she's going to bring in the future when they get remarried, if they get divorced and then remarried, that's all something that doesn't exist in the world today at all. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, who's holding that you shouldn't make an Isser on that, you shouldn't allow her Isser on that to stand, you should be made for it, is obviously holding that the Isser would be chal on that, even though it's something which doesn't exist. It's a davar shelo ba'al olam. So perhaps Rabbi Akiva holds that it's not an issue because he's not concerned about a davar shelo ba'al olam. Now, the Gemara says that Shmuel says that the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, which seems to imply that a person could make isurim, or similarly, he could be makdish, something which does not exist in the world yet, something which is a davar shelo ba'al olam. So the Gemara has a kasha on that. That is that there is a brisa that has a similar discussion, which seems to be based also on the concept of davar shelo ba'al olam, and over there, Shmuel paskins the other way. So let's see the brisa. The brisa discusses where a man is makdish his wife's maaseh yadayim, her malacha, that is, that she owes to him. So the brisa begins by saying if he's makdish it and he's not paying her mizonos, her food that's in exchange for it, so then, of course, it has no relevance because she keeps her own maaseh yadayim, so he can't be makdish it. So that's not relevant to our discussion. The next case is if she is receiving mizonos, so the maaseh yadayim is his, so he's makdish it. So that maaseh yadayim belongs to hektish. Now, what about the extra? What about the earnings that she receives that are over and above the mizonos value that she gets from him? So the halacha of those earnings is that she keeps them, but the husband inherits them after she dies. Now, he's makdish them now, and he's in the future going to get them. So is that hektish chal now? So Rabbi Meir says it is chal. Rabbi Yochanan Sandler says it's not chal, and it seems to be a question of davar shel ba'al olam because it's not his until after Misa. And Shmuel Paskins, like Rabbi Yochanan Sandler, that it is not chal, which seems to show that a person cannot be makdish davar shel ba'al olam. If that's true, so then in our Gemara, where he's making a neder, or she's making a neder to aser or something which is lo bala olam, so it shouldn't work either. How come he paskins like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri that she could be makdish a davar shelo bala olam? So the Gemara tries a few attempts to answer this. The Gemara first wants to say that it doesn't really hold like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri fully to say that she could be makdish those ma'aseh yadayim, which are lo bala olam. He just means to say that he doesn't hold like Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says that he has to be meifir because of the extra, because of what she's going to earn above and beyond the value of the mazonos that she receives. Now, the value of the mazonos that she receives, she can't aser on him because that belongs to him. Now, Rabbi Akiva said he should be meifir because that extra doesn't belong to him. That extra belongs to her. On that, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri disagrees. He disagrees on more than one thing, but he disagrees on that. And he holds, no, he doesn't have to be meifir because of that, because he holds, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri holds, that extra doesn't belong to the woman, it belongs to the husband, even though it's above the mazonas. So on that point, that's where Shmuel is saying halacha like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, not like Rabbi Akiva. He doesn't have to be meifir on account of that extra because it belongs to him, not to her. That's the point that he wants to make. That is a biased proposal to explain Pshat and Shmuel. So the Gemara says that can't be correct because the language of Shmuel and the halachas like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is imprecise. Allah is not like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri completely. It's only like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri in this yisod. It's not like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri that her iser, her neder, is chal on the ma'aseh yadayim that she's going to receive, that she will earn after the divorce, because that's davar shelo ba'al olam. So you shouldn't say that Allah is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. You should have other ways of expressing it more precisely. Like, for example, you could say that Allah is not like Rabbi Akiva. That would clearly say that it's not like Rabbi Akiva completely, because Rabbi Akiva says he has to be meifir because of that extra. That would express it exactly. Or he could have said that the halacha is like the Tanakama. Tanakama says very clearly not like Rabbi Akiva and does not hold like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri that in as far as the sugya of davar shelo ba'al olam. So that's what he should have said. So since he didn't say that, it must not be that this is the correct pshat. So therefore, we're back to our question: how over here, in the case of Nedarim, could Shmuel paskin differently about a davar shelo ba'al olam than in the case of hektish? So Rav Yosef offers a different answer, and he says hektish and Nedarim are different. You cannot compare the two. In the sugya of Nedarim, you could make a neder to aser a davar shelo ba'al olam, and that is because the power of a neder could apply even to something which is not yours. You could aser somebody else's things on you. So a davar shelo ba'al olam is not worse than something which isn't yours. Something which isn't yours is not in your rishus. Something which is not existent in the world is also not under your control. You could still aser it on yourself. And therefore you can make a neder on something which is a davar shelo ba'al olam. However, hektish doesn't apply. You can't be makdish somebody else's things. And therefore hektish can only apply to something that's under your control. Something which is lo ba'al olam is not under your control. You cannot be makdish it. Now, Abaya fires back, and Abaya says this can't be correct, because you can only make a neder on something which is not in your control as far as answering it on you. You have to be part of the equation somehow. Either the thing you're answering is under your control, or you're answering it on yourself. You can't answer somebody else's things on someone else. Therefore, to apply an iser on the husband, on ma'aseh yadayim, which are lo ba'al olam is like, it's not under your control. How could you make the iser to the husband on ma'aseh yadayim which don't exist? She doesn't have any part of that equation. And therefore, you cannot compare and learn from there. You cannot say that in this sense, it's Nedarim makes sense to apply to lo ba'al olam. The opposite is true. Lo ba'al olam is a problem for Nedarim if the iser is being on someone else, not on the person who's making it, which in this case is the wife. Therefore, we have a third answer that we have to come on to. That's Huna of Yeshua. And he says she wasn't makdish the earnings, she was makdish her hands. She was makdish her hands for the purpose of the earnings that are going to come from them in the future. And her hands are bala olam. So Gemara asks, her hands are b'layim, but her hands are the rishus of her husband. The husband has rishus over those earnings. He has rishus over her hands to the production of those earnings. So Gemara says no. So she says, when I will be divorced, then my hands are mukdash. Then my hands are aser for the earnings that they're going to earn on my husband. So Gemara says, well, that's the same problem. That's the same issue of davar shelo b'layim. Her hands aren't hers now. Could you make a hektish? Can you be makdish something which is not your property yet because it's going to become yours soon? So Gemara quotes a similar case. Gemara says, if somebody says to his friend, I own a field. I'm going to sell you the field. Then I'm going to buy the field back from you. And right now I'm being makdish the field that should be chal when I buy it back from you. So the Gemara says, well, this is kind of similar. There, his hektish is only going to apply on the field when he gets it back. Here, she wants to apply an Isser Nedarim on her hands when she gets them back. So the Gemara says, no, that's also not comparable, because over there, at least now he owns the field. He's going to sell the field. Here, she does not have possession of her hands. What is accurately compared to is a case where he already sold the field, and he says to the person who owns it, I'm going to buy it from you when I'm being makdish it now, for when I buy it from you. And in that case, it doesn't work. And therefore, in this case, it shouldn't work either. Gemara asks further, this is still not the right comparison. You can't compare to that case because there's a difference between a sale of a field and a woman's hands being meshubah to her husband. The woman's hands don't belong to her husband. The woman has just given the production of her hands, her ma'aseh yadayim, to her husband. That's like the fruits of a field. So the correct comparison would be to a case where somebody still owns a field, but he gave it to someone else as a mashkon. And he says, when I redeem it from you, it should be hektish at that point. So this lady is saying, when I get my payers back from my hands, that's when this marriage ends, then I'm makdish now that those payers that I'm going to get back the rights to should become hektish. And in that case, where somebody's makdish the field that he will redeem, there the hektish is chal. So here also the hektish should be chal. And that's why she's allowed to be makdish her hands, even though it's theoretically loy b'al olam. So Gemara says, no, it's still not the right comparison, because there's a very big difference, and that's a person who wants to redeem his field could redeem it at any time he wants. It's within his power to redeem it. Even at this point, he has control over whether to redeem it or not, and therefore he could be makdish it. However, the case of that you're bringing, where the lady is makdish her hands, she doesn't have control over when she's going to get divorced from her husband. She doesn't have any shlit over when the marriage will end, and therefore you can't accurately compare the two and say that she should have the right to be makdish her payers of her hands at that point either. It's still not correct. So what would the correct comparison be? Says the Gemara, the correct comparison should be to a case where the person was mashkon, he was mashkin his field, and he doesn't have the right to end it when anytime he wants, such as when he gave it to a minimum period of 10 years. So here also, she doesn't have right to get her hands back, and there, in that case, he doesn't have right to get the control, the pairs of his field back. So it says Gemara, but over there he also has right to be makdish when he'll get it back. So here, let her have right to be makdish her hand when she gets it back, so it should still work. So the Gemara says, no, it's still different, because over there at least it ends after 10 years. There's a fixed time when it's going to end, so he still has some power over it. Here, though, she doesn't have any specific time when this marriage is going to end, and therefore you can't compare the two. And I don't have a valid explanation as to why she should ever be able to be makdish her ma'aseh yadayim for the future, unless you're going to say that a davar shelo b'al olam works, and then you should have a kasha on Shmuel, who says that a davar shelo b'al olam does not work in the case of neder. So the Gemara therefore has to give a new answer, and the Gemara says there's a difference between this hektish case we are discussing and the case of nedarim, and that's that nedarim work like being makdish something kedushas haguf. All these cases we're discussing kedushas damim, that is value. Whenever you're makdish something for value, it can't happen if it belongs to someone else. However, being makdish something for kedushas haguf overrides someone else's rights over it and knocks out that person's rights. So, for example, if you owe somebody money and you set aside a certain piece of property that he could take whenever he wants, he could collect from that. That's what's called an apoitiki. So that person has control over it. But then you take that thing and you're makdish it kedushas haguf. You make it go on the mizbeach itself. That kedusha totally takes over anyone's possession of it and knocks out the apoitiki and has to collect from someplace else. And neder is the same thing. It's like kedushas haguf. It's an isser in the guf of the thing itself, and it takes away the possession of the husband. It takes away his control over her hands, and therefore she can do it even now, even though it's in her husband's property. And this is like halacha. We've seen that if somebody owes property to someone else and it becomes hektish kedushas haguf, or it becomes chametz on Pesach, or it's an Evan and he frees it, it leaves and he has no control over it anymore. There is no shibud on it. It cancels because it has completely lost its value to the person who had control over it. So when it says if that's true, so then Hakam in the halacha of Rav Yechanan and Shmuel and what Shmuel said we hold like, it only worked that she was able to be makdish her hands for when she's going to be divorced. Why didn't Rav Yechanan ben Nuri say she can makdish her hands right now? Takes away her husband's property and possession over her immediately. So when it says you're right, we'll have to amend the brisa. We'll have to amend the wording of the Mishnah. I should say, first of all, he should be mefered because her hektish could be chal when she gets divorced, and furthermore, because it has a halacha as if it was kedushas agaf, because it creates an inherent iser in her hands. Therefore, it is chal now, even before he will be megarisher. And in the future, maybe he will be megarisher, and then you'll have the same issue.